Beyond expecting delays, you need to expect that they're going to be exempting some documents, redacting some. Welcome back to another episode of Visa Vibes, where we talk about all things business immigration. I'm Emily Newman, managing partner of Reddy Newman Brown PC.
And I'm Stephen Brown. I'm a partner here at Reddy Newman Brown PC. And today we're going to talk about an underrated tool people tend to forget about in immigration: FOIA, FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, FOIA isn't just about transparency. In immigration, it can really make or break a case.
Yeah, and what we're going to talk about is how to use it strategically, how to figure out what to get, what to ask for, when litigation becomes necessary. Emily, I've got a sweatshirt at home that says FAFO, FOIA and find out. Because I do think there's a lot of ways to use FOIA strategically, and we're going to talk about that today.
All right, so let's start simple with some background. What exactly is the Freedom of Information Act? It is at 5 USC section 552, and it basically gives anyone the right to request federal records unless some sort of exemption applies. You can't be going out and asking for stuff where there's like national security involved, that sort of thing. But it applies to all federal agencies, and anyone who has dealt with, interacted with, applied for something with a federal agency can do a records request with that agency. And so, of course, immigration falls into that.
Yeah, obviously we're talking it here on immigration. I used it a couple years ago. We had someone in our neighborhood working with a congressional liaison on issues with our post office, and she was trying to collect data. I said, why don't we just get the data they have? And we did a FOIA and got it. But in the immigration context, it's important for businesses, individuals, and honestly practitioners, right? If you're trying to be strategic. For individuals, you can request your A file. This is important, trying to figure out what's in your records that you may or may not know. Old petitions, you can request internal memos from USCIS, prior RFE templates, denials, statistics, and then I think the biggest one is policy documents. They don't publish everything. And this isn't just USCIS. You could do it with CBP, ICE, DOL. Department of State likes to, exempt everything. I think improperly, but we've done FOIAs as a firm with all of those entities.
So, why is this useful? I mean, there are many times where maybe you've moved addresses and lost a document, lost a copy of a petition that you had filed years ago, or you worked with a company and the company closed down and they didn't share a copy of a document with you, or the lawyer retired and you can't get it from them. Some cases, employers don't share everything. Like we see cases where a company kind of gets their hand slapped a little bit, gets a notice of intent to deny or intent to revoke because they did something not great and they don't want to share it with the employee, but it impacts the employee because there's names on it too. And so that may leave you without access to full copies of documents that were submitted on your behalf, like especially I-140s, yep. I-129s. You don't do the filing. It's all in someone else's control. You have no control over what they submit. And sometimes that can bite you if you don't know. But all of this is helpful for future filings because you may need a copy of a missing document. You may need to remember what you put on a document. Maybe you lost an experience letter that you've used before and you can get that through FOIA.
Yeah, I think a file is the most common, or approvals. I mean, you can request, I know my I-140 number was receipt number was 1234, or maybe you don't know. Maybe you just have the whole A file for Stephen Brown and give some information, but we use it all the time. I mean, sometimes if an individual doesn't have their I-140, but they know one is there, you'll get the I-140 forms. You won't get a copy of the approval, but you'll get the forms that'll be stamped at the top. It's also helpful, Emily, and I think for employers and individuals especially, USCIS is very selective with what they tell you, and they'll send a notice of intent to deny or notice of intent to revoke. And like, because of bad information, we're sending this.
There's something derogatory in your record, but they won't tell you what it is.
Right. And by the way, I think that's against regulations. But you can FOIA, right? And FOIA's should have a quick turnaround time. And I've responded to cases before saying, we want to inspect the record. By the way, we also have a FOIA, told the response deadline. And, it's very strategic. You have to think through how to do that. But it's important as a good way to get the actual record for your immigration journey.
All right, so let's walk a little more through the practical steps involved in the FOIA, because you do have to follow There's a formula to it to
Yeah.
make sure you actually get what you're looking for. So the first thing you need to identify exactly what it is you need. What document are you missing? What form are you missing? As you mentioned, like an A file is a very common one, or maybe you need your I-140 petition because the company didn't share the approval notice with you, prior H-1B approvals, or any notes that are maybe in your CVIS or SEVIS records. So FOIA is all about records, actual documents and things that were submitted, and any notations that the agency made on those records, not necessarily legal questions.
Yeah, they're not going to answer, like, is this a specialty occupation? They're not going to create records either. It's going to be what's already retained. And one thing that is key is specificity. They love to deny things saying that it's overly broad. If you send in all records ever for ABC Inc., they're going to, okay, like, that's overly broad. If you say all records for Stephen Brett. They might get you that. I know when I ask for things that I want that are policies and procedures, like I gotta really narrow, be broad but narrow, which is kind of a fine, tool to get through, but it can lead to more delays, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
All right, so once you know exactly what document or information you're after, then you have to make sure that you're asking it from the right agency, because these are all separate agencies that all work together and coordinate for various immigration related processes. But you don't want to reach out to Department of State when the document is with USCIS or vice versa, because they're just going to say, talk to each other and you're delaying. So if you are looking for an A file, petition copy file, request for evidence, decisions, denials,
Data.
yeah, that's going to be USCIS. If you want to know something from your travel history, maybe I-94s, maybe entry records, that's all CBP. USCIS won't have that, so you need to go to the correct agency. If you're looking for something related to F1 student visas, SEVIS records, enforcement records, that's all ICE because they're in charge of student visas and they're in charge of enforcement. And then if anything related to the consulate, anything you've done for a visa application, that's going to be Department of State. But they're a little tricky because they will only provide you what you've specifically provided to them, not anything that they have put in your file.
Yeah, they like to hide behind 1202F, and I think they're misapplying it. But almost all of these agencies have an online system, and they prefer online. You can mail them, but they prefer their online system. But Emily's right. You have to choose the correct agency, and it's kind of funny. Sometimes they don't even know. I
Right.
remember doing one. I wanted statistics related to immigrant visa petitions with USCIS. I filed a FOIA and I gave out what statistics I wanted. And they said, that's not our agency. That's Department of State. And I said, I don't think you're right. Can you think again? Well, it deals with visas. That's Department of State. And I said, oh, like, can I talk to somebody? They called me and I explained. I was like, hey, I was using the legal term, immigrant visas. They're like, oh, we're thinking petitions. I was like, okay, I got you. So it is important. I now put like immigrant visas, also called immigrant petitions, when I do things like that, so I don't get flagged with that. But the online system for all of these, and I've done FOIAs with all of these agencies, is actually very easy to work through. I think my hardest thing is remembering my passwords.
So that's good. And it's when you do it online, it tends to be pretty quick
You
in
get
a lot of
you'll get
cases, right?
the processing, especially with A files. They got sued a few years ago, and we'll talk more about delays, but they are pretty good about getting you A files.
All right. So once you have identified what it is you're looking for and you've picked the correct agency. Now, when you're actually going to fill out your FOIA request, you need to provide the specifics. And again, is that being very specific about what you're looking for. Make sure that you include all names used, date of birth, receipt numbers, passport number, old passport number, dates of entry, anything that will help them locate the record or the file that you're looking for. The more data you can provide that ties that document to you, the more likely they're going to be able to find it and actually respond to you.
Yeah, and the USCIS first website kind of walks you through that when you go through. I mean, they're going to ask questions that, mother's name, father's name, spouse. Like, when I do them, I don't always do all of that information because I could get enough specificity. But the goal is to try to reduce the risk of irrelevant information. If I did Stephen Brown, Houston, Texas records, like there's probably at least 100 of us, I imagine. But could come out with more redactions because it has irrelevant information. So the more specificity, the better the documentation.
All right. So once you do that, you will submit the actual FOIA request, and USCIS will give you a control number, and that allows you to actually continue to monitor the progress online.
Yeah, and they're going to drag their feet. Okay. We'll talk about litigation later and when it's appropriate, but by statute, they have 20 business days to respond. Now, if it's complex, which I actually have a FOIA out to determine how they use that with USCIS, but they can add an additional 10 business days. So really 30 business days at most is how they should. They don't usually follow that, but they should. Department of Labor is actually the one that's been good about getting me stuff on time.
All right. So yeah. Um, Also, beyond expecting delays, you need to expect that they're going to be exempting some documents, redacting some documents. There are, in the FOIA statute, there are actual 9 exemptions that they can use to say, hey, we do have this record, but we can't provide it to you because of one of these 9 exemptions, or we have redacted parts of it because it falls into one of those 9 exemptions where they can't actually release that to you. They're related to privacy, deliberative process documents.
National
Yeah.
security investigations, those are the ones they like. They love investigation. Sometimes they over apply it. And, litigation can become a tool or appeals, in the FOIA process can become a good tool. You'd have to appeal and then, at least pro forma appeal and then sue. But there are ways to challenge some of those redactions. But for the most part, for most of our listeners, the redactions, the exemptions aren't going to impact what you are wanting for most people.
Mhm. All right. So once you get the documents, how can you use them strategically? What's the point of all this? So FOIA really can be used to help you reconstruct your immigration history, especially people who've been here like since the 70s, and are trying to apply for citizenship or something like that. They don't remember things. They don't keep those documents forever. Nobody does. And so that will really help connect the dots of what that person's immigration journey and help find any red flags there. Can also be useful sometimes to help recover missing approvals.
Yeah.
If you've lost a H-1B approval notice or something like that, or it got lost in the mail, you can analyze prior filings of your employer to find out what, again, because they're submitting everything on your behalf and you don't have any control over it and they're not providing it to you, you can FOIA it and get it yourself and see if there's anything in there that they've submitted that's inaccurate or misrepresenting or fraudulent documents or something like that.
I think that's big,
Yeah.
right? Because we see all the time, like 10 years down the road, and it's like employer 6 years ago said X, Y, and Z, and you're like, what? Like, I
Mhm.
would have never said I'm a professional basketball player in an H-1B. Like, why would they have said that? And then you could go look, and is it a you document or a them document?
Yeah. And you can also see if there's any status issues. Sometimes you can tell if they've maybe flagged something because you get a copy of your actual form that you submitted like in a 485 application and now I have the officer's notes on it and sometimes they'll circle certain questions about misrepresentation or status violation and that gives us a idea of what might be coming at an interview or what we need to dig deeper into to make sure that the person qualifies. And then it can help with just preparing future filings, future H-1Bs, I-140s, AOS, EB-1C to make sure that you're not submitting anything that's misaligned with what you've submitted in the past or not consistent.
Yeah, I think especially as we see things draw out more, what was in that perm filing a company did a year ago, and now you're trying to apply for an EB1C. Does this align? And sometimes they said something different, and they are catching that. So be accurate. It helps you be more accurate with everything.
So we want to go through a couple of scenarios where we've used FOIA in the past and what it's been useful for. So number one is lost approvals or approvals that were never shared. So very common scenario is I have left company A. I am now filing my transfer to company B. I'm beyond my 6-year limit. I normally need to submit my I-140 approval from the previous company in order to get a 3-year extension, but that employer is not willing to share that document. You can get it yourself. You don't exactly get the I-140 approval, but you do get the I-140 form that was submitted on your behalf, and it'll have a stamp approval on it with a case number. So you can use that, and then that will allow you to get the H-1B extension. But you've also been able to get actual H-1B approvals, like something got lost in the mail, and you were, who's going to pay what, $700 now for an I-824? Premium processing said, nope, we
Yeah.
put it in the mail. It's your problem now. So you use FOIA and we're able to get a duplicate approval, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of emailed and be like, look, I'm going to get this information. Can you just help me out? It also helps with A file reconstruction. I mean, sometimes, look, especially when we talk about the green card backlog, this is a long journey, and people don't remember their filing from 2010, okay, and all the information in it. So it can help with those old student cases, past denials you had. You're like, I remember getting a denial, I don't remember what it was for, missing information, missing transfers, what's going on in your file, and you can kind of put together that puzzle. Just ask for the A file.
Yeah, and it can be useful for employers too, especially if certain employers maybe tend to get these kind of fishing expedition type of requests for evidence where they're asking for all kinds of information about previous petitions filed, employees, payroll records, and all of that. Sometimes those can be triggered because of something along the way that's in the company's record that the company has no idea about and could be completely wrong. They maybe got it mixed up with another company or just misunderstood what happened. And so you can do a FOIA to find out what they have on record about that company, figure out how many filings you have so you can prepare, make sure that you're ready for new filings and do an internal audit, especially, maybe like HR people changed hands or something like that. And they're having to reconstruct everything that the company filed because they didn't keep records.
Yeah, it's definitely a good way to do it. I think one of the biggest ways I use it is kind of a pet project, if you will, with policy, program, and data. So I use it, we can figure out what's going on behind the scenes a little bit. Now, we won't get everything because of some of those exemptions, but maybe we can piece together internal memos about H4 EADs. L1B, gosh, I mean, I don't know what's going on sometimes at Chennai, consulate, and we've got a FOIA out on that. Other policies, sometimes we'll ask about data, so we can piece together for delay lawsuits. One of the things the government likes to say is, oh, we do things first in, first out. Well, when we get data from FOIA, we can show that that's not true. But it also, again, so we've built out cases strategy first using FOIA, but it also helps. Like, we have a change of administration, right, back in January. I can promise you there have been internal memos about EB1A. There is changes of adjudication that is not publicly known. So what's going on? Well,
Yeah,
FOIA.
because I mean, since Trump took office, generally there has been zero change in the law, very few new
Right.
regulations, very few actual policy manual update. So how is it the adjudication trends are completely changing when nothing's changed?
Right.
Something changed and it's all internal. So FOIA can help us get that.
Yeah. And, I think overall, if you just feel something's weird, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you have filed a 485, your priority date's been current for a while and you're just not getting an update, or maybe you've been called in for multiple interviews on the same case, um, or maybe you've had something, notice of intent to revoke or something like that, you can often submit the FOIA, get some documents, and actually target and figure out what the issue is to be able better prepared for to overcome it.
Yeah. And it also helps with, preparation. I mean, if you, for some reason, keep getting site visits, like, what's going on?
Mhm.
Why are they targeting you? Maybe it's something from before the company was purchased that you guys are cleaning up.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what happens when FOIA doesn't go as smoothly. You mentioned that USCIS gets the 20 business days to respond and maybe some extra 10 every once in a while. But
Almost always.
do they often reply within the 20 business days like they're supposed to?
No, actually, funny story. I've I now delayed FOIA on FOIA processing times because I want to use it in FOIA litigation to show, like, but for litigation, you're going to be waiting. Because I've had cases, Emily, that have been like 2 years down the road. I get a disc. Like, what? I don't remember. Oh yeah, I filed a FOIA for this 2 years ago. Forgot about it. And I get the disc in, and they finally get it to me. But
And I love that it's on a CD.
I've got our
It's
CD. I had to go out and buy a
2025.
CD drive a couple years ago for the office.
It's not on microfiche or something at this point.
They're sending me Telegram. They've got it. Doing.
Carrier pigeon.
But the statute requires a determination within 20 days, meaning they're going to tell you whether they're going to respond or not, and usually produce records, and they can ask for additional 10 days. If it's outside of an A file, USCIS, like even their intake letter confirming the FOIA, they're like, we're going to request the 10 days. And then I've gone back and forth, like, that's not how the statute's written, but like, whatever, 10 days. Um, but they don't even reply in that 30 business days a lot of times, especially USCIS when you go outside of a file requests. And so that's a constructive denial of a FOIA. They're not producing it on time in a statutorily required time. Uh, you can go straight to federal court. There is no requirement to exhaust administrative remedies on a delayed FOIA. There is on denied FOIA. You do have to do an appeal. I have an appeal pending right now because they told me program information was exempted under personnel information. I said, yes, I did have a personnel file request, but my other two have nothing to do with it. They're like, okay, well, you can appeal. I'm like, okay. But yeah, they are required to do something. Department of Labor does. They make me pay them, but which they can do.
I would rather have that option.
Right? Like, okay, yeah, you want me to pay a couple $100 to get this information because it's taking you time? Like, that's cool. But like USCIS just waits.
Yeah. All right. So, from your experience, when does it make sense to litigate these delays, especially from USCIS?
Yeah, I think it really is going to depend on your situation. If the delay is something that's harming a pending file, like I need my I-140, I got to put the priority date. I don't know my priority date. I think I'm current, but I don't know. Like, yeah, like go FOIA. Those A file ones go quick, definitely. If it's an essential document for your status or your strategy, like get on it quick. Again, this is going to be a lot of personal, and I have discussions with people like, what do we want to do? Do we FOIA it, sue on the FOIA? Do we wait? Do we kind of, this is a strategy um, thing first. The A file production they are pretty good at, but sometimes it's not, especially if you're like, I've had 5 green card interviews, I had to write a sworn statement, and now I've hired an attorney and nobody knows what's going on. I'd get on it. Um, the If you have deadlines piling up and you need the data, definitely. Um, if they're just dragging their feet and it's a large group of people, I think, or a large group of the community that's impacted, I think it's good. And sometimes you do it, I do it. I just don't want to wait. Unfortunately, I keep adding FOIAs, and I'm like, I don't want to file another lawsuit. So I keep waiting the 20 days for the last one I filed. Sometimes it's just go file, pay the filing fees, and maybe hire an attorney to do it.
All right. So, speaking of attorneys, let's say that I filed a FOIA, they're taking forever. I decide to sue. I've heard that you may be able to get the government to pay your attorney fees.
Yeah, that's actually what kind of makes FOIA litigation a little fun. Now, it's not every case. I want to be clear. We did recently, I think this year, get a client attorney's fees from a FOIA case. FOIA has a fee shifting statute. You can request them if you substantially prevail in the lawsuit. Now, what does that mean? That can vary from district to district. Um, One of the compelling ways to look at this that courts look at this is, are you the causation, right? So you sued, and then they finally produced their documents. It's kind of they've relented on the delay, but you caused the production because of your lawsuit. And that's kind of how a lot of them go. And so they looked at that causation. There's other elements that they look into about how much, the public benefit and all that. Uh, but we have been able to get fees for our clients in the FOIA litigation context, and it's not a guarantee, but it's definitely something that helps. When I talk to clients, like this is something we can try for, and it is different than our normal litigation, right? Normal litigation, I have to be a prevailing party, show the government was substantially unjustified. Ultimately, we're hoping they settle early so we don't have to fight it out. FOIA is a little bit different because if they do kind of work to resolve it, we could still move for fees.
All right. So why is FOIA litigation such an effective tool for immigration cases these
Yeah,
days?
yeah. I think number one, it's the best way to get documents quickly, right? Especially when we talk about some of these, they don't want to, they don't produce timely. I told you, we had waited 2 years. I got a disc. I'm like, what is this? And I forgot I filed that one. I also don't see them challenge these cases all that much. Typically when we talk about a delay in FOIA, it's we file, they get to their 30-day, deadline because that's different. They get 30 days to 60 in FOIA. They're like, okay, let's work out a production schedule. We've got X number of pages. We'll produce them at X number a month. Let's go. And then we kind of debate on that, but we're not really fighting on too much of it. The production schedule is going to be key, and some judges are going to push back on it. I remember I was actually in court. There's a FOIA case before me, before I was going on a case, and the judge was like, "You want to drag this out another 2 years because your production schedule is going to be like 300 pages a month?" And she's like, yeah, they're like, yeah, well, we've had cuts. Like, okay, I want to know who's been fired from the FOIA office. The fee provision also incentivizes them to settle, right? If they were to try to file a motion to dismiss or fight this out in court, and they lose, that increases your chances of fees, and that increases how many fees, and it does enforce accountability. And judges I think are very sympathetic to FOIA cases because the idea is Congress has said you're going to provide these documents in a timely manner, and government agencies just thumb their nose at it a little
Mhm.
bit.
All right. So for our listeners, if you're waiting months and months with no update, that's not normal. And these are delays that can be litigated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way I typically do it is when I file a FOIA, I calendar it for 20 business days, and then if they give me the 30-day letter, I'll calendar it for 30 business days. And keep an eye out. Do I want to litigate this right at 30 days? Maybe it's something I can wait a little bit. I've got other FOIAs pending. I'll put them all in one. But, especially for our people that are listening that aren't just doing FOIAs as a pet project or they're irritated at an officer, so they're going to file FOIAs like I've done. And we've done in our office, right? We've seen something like, I don't understand how you come to this conclusion. Like, let's FOIA what's going on. For most of our listeners, Emily, I think they can be aggressive if they want to.
Yeah, I feel like the government just kind of assumes people don't know the law and are just assuming that they just have to wait.
Yeah,
And so
especially
they get away with a lot because of that.
definitely, especially with FOIA.
All right, so I wanted to kind of wrap up a little bit with some best practices, pitfalls, things to just be aware of. So again, be specific about the documents you want. If you request too broad, if you make your request too broad, it's just going to slow everything down because they can't locate the targeted item that you need.
Yeah, and then choose the right agency and sub-agency, right? Yeah, Department of Labor will have which Department of Labor sub-agency, sub-department do you want it to? There are times it goes to the wrong department, they'll deny the FOIA because they say that's not records that we maintain. Or they think that it's the wrong department even if it's not. So make sure you're going to the right location.
And then keep your acknowledgement notices, control numbers, document your timeline, put it on a calendar. When they say 20 business days, put that on your calendar so you can check if you actually received it within that time. And then you can decide whether you want to take the next action from there.
Yeah, and then review the records with a fine-tooth comb. Look at what's in there. Why did you request it and see that it's in there? Maybe there's something you wouldn't have thought would be in there. I know when we do like programmatic ones, I send it out to multiple of our attorneys. We kind of go through it and then we'll talk about it. And I'll be like, oh, did you see this on page 2? And Emily will be, oh, did you see this on page 35? I mean, but sometimes what I see might be different than what Emily sees is important. So go through it with a fine tooth comb.
And then just assume that there's going to be some things that are redacted, some things that are exempted, and just kind of factor that into your planning. Know that if you're asking for something from the Department of State, you're going to be very limited in what you get. It's literally just your DS 160 that you've submitted, and that's about it.
Yeah, and if the delay is harming your case or you're trying to build something and you need information from that agency, I mean, consider litigation early. Like, again, the way I view it, especially when we talk about FOIA delays, is in immigration, it's very time sensitive. And so if I've requested policies and procedures today and they don't give it to me for 4 months, I know things are going to change in the next 4 months. And so it's important to calendar and get early.
All right, and some of the pitfalls with FOIA requests, be sure that you don't submit your request as a question. It's always got to be tied to a specific record or specific document or form.
Yeah, and then we've said this Department of State, they're going to hold back everything, even though they shouldn't. They're going to call it under 1202F, which, by the way, applies to passport filings. I don't know how they've gotten away with expanding it to like
Yeah.
everything.
And then, remember that when you get that first letter with your control number and it says, we'll respond to you within 20 business days, know that that's not going to happen and just be prepared to take action when you don't get the response on time.
Yeah, and it's okay to follow up. Almost every one of these letters has some sort of liaison for FOIA or FOIA officer you can email. Um, And I went back and forth with one a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I'll just file the appeal. But it's okay to reach out to them. It's not going to hurt anything.
All right, so kind of putting it all together, FOIA can really be a core strategy for immigration filings to ensure that you're being consistent and aligned with what's been submitted in the past, kind of rebuild a file if you've lost documents, and can be really helpful to figure out if there's anything in the record that can negatively impact you.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be passive. You can have remedies if they're being slow on this. And if I'm tired of waiting, file a lawsuit.
And whether you're preparing for an EB1C or just kind of needing to recreate your H1B history, getting ready to file adjustment of status, FOIA should definitely be on your preparation list for ways to make sure your case is solid going forward.
Yeah, and like my FOIA litigation sweatshirt always says, if they're delaying, you can FAFO, FOIA and find out. And I got that just kind of being cheeky, but it is kind of a good narrative. I've spoken at conferences on FOIA. It's an important tool.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us today on our deep dive into FOIA. Hopefully, you found it helpful and know that you can use it in your case.
Yeah, and if you ever have a FOIA and maybe you're trying to build a FOIA strategy or you need something, feel free to reach out. A lot of our attorneys have used it to build out green card cases or help people with approvals, whatever you need. Or if you're like, hey, I think this is super delayed as a program, maybe we can go figure out what's going on.
And don't forget, every month we usually sponsor at least one webinar, if not two, that are timely with what's going on in immigration, specific topics that you might be helpful to you. So feel free to check out our website to find out the calendar for that, and you can register online for those.
Yeah, thanks for joining today.